And what happened in that strange period in 1991 was that, you know, when you press the keys on a computer too many, and it freezes because it says, I can't process this, and that's what happened to me. And that's when Time Warp stuck in. That's when media Time Warp locked in. It's official, Icke's a nutter, that's the end of it. And
well, you did go on the Wogan show and say, and you didn't deny, when he asked you if you were the son of God, you didn't deny it.
Well, yeah, but that has to be put into context. What I was saying, and you've got to understand at that time that I was going through this amazing transformation of awareness. It was like everything morphed back, and people were saying to me, I thought you'd gone mad, mate. You're the same David Icke I knew. And I was, in terms of the way they saw me. But I wasn't, because now I'm seeing the world in a completely different way. Before, there were puzzle pieces all over the floor. Now, suddenly, I can see how they fit together. And I spent the last 25 years putting them together.
So, what is your puzzle like? What does it look like?
The five senses decode, the ear's a classic, but it's the same with all of them. They decode waveform information, energetic information. Think of it as the wireless internet. The five senses turn that information from waveform into electrical information, same information, different form, which is communicated to the brain. So, for instance, if I bang my shin, I don't say ouch until that message has got to the brain. And the brain takes that information from the five senses and it constructs reality. And therefore, we are living in an illusory reality in terms of solidity. That's why that table, which seems so solid, is made of atoms, and atoms have no solidity. As someone rightly said, if you take an atom to be the size of a cathedral, the nucleus of the atom is about the size of a 10-cent piece. Everything else is empty space. How can that make the solid world? It's not solid. So once you come from that perspective...
Yet if I pick it up and bash you on the head with it, well, it's going to hurt.
Yes, because that's the way we decode information. I've been saying now for so many years in my books that this world is actually holographic. And a hologram is not solid, it's not physical, it's illusory solid, and it's illusory three-dimensional. Now, once you're dealing with something that's holographic, something that is a projection, you're no longer dealing with someone getting the metal and the stuff and all the rest of it and making a moon. Because it's a projection. It's a holographic projection.
So the moon isn't real?
No. Well, none of it's real, really, because it's all a projection. But
is the universe a projection?
Yes, it is. And that's what these scientific teams in Bonn and America have come to the conclusion
so who's projecting
of.
Who's projecting the projection?
Well, I mean, you can keep going on and keep going on, and that's why I keep going on. And these are the questions we need to understand. But once you're dealing with something that's not physical, limitation disappears. We have to expand our perception of the possible. You see, if you want to keep people in the box, keep people in the bubble, one of the fundamental ways of doing that is to suppress their perception of the possible. Because when you're doing things out here, people in the perception bubble will say, that's not possible, that's not possible, it can't be done, and they dismiss it when you can go on and do it without being challenged.
Who's keeping us in the box, and why would they want to do that?
Well, I mean, you know, this is why Wembley was 10 hours and my books are that long. There's so many dots to connect, but there is a force which is feeding off human energy, and it operates. This is why understanding the nature of reality is so important, to understand this force, because this force takes a form that basically energetic in its base form, though it can project form, and it operates on the fringes of our perception band. So when people say, well, you're talking about these people, I've never seen them, well, you wouldn't, because they're operating outside.
To sum that up, if it's possible, then it is like the Matrix, that we are being controlled. This is something that's being controlled for us. It's being made for us, and it is, what, millennia old?
Oh, yeah, probably, and the rest. But
yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting point. If you take the Matrix movies, you take away the poetic license, you take away all the violence, and you take away all the, you know, the stuff they put in movies, and you take the basic concept of people living in a reality thinking it's real when it isn't. Our prime reality has been hacked into, just like the Matrix. A lot of stuff comes out of Hollywood, which is actually telling you the truth.
Would you say that I was wrong, therefore, to be quite enjoying my fake reality? I mean, am I suppressed in such a way that I don't even realise it? Because I quite like it.
Well,
yeah.
If you want to like living in this reality, then good for you.
So what about we're controlled by. It has to have control. There have to be people who control it, I assume, if they're creating this reality for us. And you've said quite controversially that you know that the royal family and members of the media and members of the banking profession are all part of this controlling force.
The ones that control the system, not everybody in those professions.
Right. So we are being controlled by a group of super beings.
Well, actually, not super beings. You know, if we are super beings. We are infinite awareness. That's what we are. We are awareness. And what this body does, I call it the biological computer, is it focuses the attention of that awareness in this tiny band of frequency called visible light. So we think this is all there is. When people leave the body, and suddenly, this is a constantly common theme, that their awareness suddenly expands, suddenly past, present and future all exist in the same now, because there is no time. That's another illusion. And the reason that they suddenly have this expansion of awareness is that their point of attention has left the focus, the lens, the body, and can suddenly be set free.
I'm so sorry to keep jumping in, David.
That's all right.
It's only because our time and dimensional restrictions are less infinite. If this has been going on for millennia, how long is it going to be before you wake up the planet to the fact that this is all a creation? And then what happens? Because you'll freak out the entire planet. Well, if you strip down the wallpaper of the Matrix and suddenly we end up with this reality that is the true reality, we'll be frightened to death.
Is it better? Well, I've read about near-death experiences. I've never read one that wanted to come back. This is in a sense, this place is hell.
If the royal family are alien beings, or some of them, or some bankers, or some in the media, then you're talking about a global war to push them out? How do we get rid of them?
Well, the thing is, their power is in us not knowing they exist, and their power is also this, getting the population to give us their power. We give... Oh, I don't, my goodness me, the very thought. But how many people give their power to the royal family? How many people give their power to governments? How many people give their power to bankers? All the time.
So your reality is anarchy?
No, it's not anarchy. It's the opposite. Do you think bombing innocent civilians from the sky to protect them from violence is not anarchy? Do you think lending money that doesn't exist, called credit, and if we don't pay them back plus interest, they can take our real wealth, our homes and our land and our businesses and stuff? Do you think that's not anarchy? People dying of hunger in a world of plenty is not anarchy. We have anarchy now. So when we expand our consciousness, we have anything but anarchy. We have intelligence, which is what we lack now.
I have to ask you then, if your method is to spread the word, enlighten everyone, why did people have to spend £62 to go in and see your show, your talk at Wembley Arena? Why didn't you let them all in for free and do it night after night after night? Right. Why did they have to pay? Money, you say money is evil.
How much? I don't say money is evil. I don't say money is evil. I say the money, the way it's used is evil, and the way it's created is evil. I didn't call it evil,
but why isn't this free?
Do you know how much it costs to publish a book? Do you know how much it costs to hire Wembley Arena? For one day.
So you don't get any profit. It's only hiring the place out.
I have not taken a single penny from the Wembley event. It's going to go forward for the next one in October 2014. I live, Philip, in a one-bedroom flat in Ryde, Isle of Wight, with a little office where I write all my books. I'll swap my income for yours any day.
Mine doesn't exist. It's not reality.
Right, okay.
That's fascinating,
well,
and this is what we're talking about. Here you go, human race. Get off your knees. The lion sleeps no more. David Icke, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
One of those great opportunities has arrived while I'm here in Avebury doing the solstice. I've bumped into David Icke of all people. So, yep, David, welcome to one of my favourite spiritual places on earth.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, I've been coming here a long time, since 1990, and I love it round here. I love Wiltshire in general, but Avebury's my favourite circle, more than Stonehenge. It's got a much more feminine feel about it, I think.
I think also the stones at Stonehenge are squared off, aren't they? And it's just basically a bunch of squared off stones in a field, but Avebury's got a unique character to it.
Yeah, I like it. I love it. It's got a lovely feel to it.
Yeah. So why are you, what's the reason why you're here today? You're making a short film, are you?
Well, not really. No, people at come onto my website were invited if they wanted to come along and throw questions. So I'm going to do that, and we'll put it out on the website at some point.
Well, that should be cool. All right, and I'll look out for that. It's just your website, davidicke.com, and I'll just be able to find a link from there when it's...
Yeah. When it starts to be put up. Yeah, it won't be for a few weeks yet because I'm at home. But when I start travelling in the second half of the year, talking around the world, then they'll be broadcast instead of some of the newsletters that I do.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I wanted to ask you something, actually, because I've noticed in a few over the years is that I meet people and they've got what you call a very much fixed, rigid conspiracist mentality towards everything, where I am quite optimistic. Sometimes I see holes, I see things going wrong, like in the, I could say, in the upper echelons, and I wonder whether it's part of a controlled demolition or because they're falling on their own sword. And recently with the scandal of police brutality and MPs' expenses, I see this on one level. A lot of people don't agree with me. They see this as part of a problem to create a reaction, to create a solution. But I see that it's starting to pull itself to pieces. And I wonder what your take on that would be.
Well, I think two things are happening. There's the immovable object, which thinks it is, but isn't really, and that's the conspiracy, and the families who are centralising power in the world at an extraordinarily fast rate.
Yeah.
And then there's the irresistible force, which is an irresistible force, and that's a vibrational change that's happening, which is starting more and more demonstrably and blatantly to affect people's perception of reality.
Yeah.
And I've kind of been a barometer for this, because when I started talking about this, funnily enough, the first book I ever wrote was in 1990 on these subjects, and it was called Truth Vibrations, and it was about the fact that this vibrational change was coming, and there was no evidence at the time that this was happening or would happen. But as I've watched the years pass in this illusion we call time, right up to the present day, I've seen more and more people who 20 years ago would have just laughed at this stuff, who are now completely encompassing it. And people who have been what I might call system people, who have had the system thinking for them and feeling for them most of their lives, are suddenly breaking out of that. And it's happening in numbers. And I've been to about 50 countries now researching this and talking about it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from that experience that it's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm optimistic in the sense that I think the outcome is going to be very positive in the end. But we do have the immovable object, which isn't, but is going to try to make itself so.
Yeah.
The police state, the manipulation of banking and programming people through education, and the suppression of real science, all these things. And that's not going to go quietly.
Yeah.
So in so many ways, we're heading very fast, if not we're already there. We're in this fork in the road where people, are you going to go on letting the system dictate your sense of reality, therefore enslave you, or are you going to break out of it and go with this changing vibe? And it's going to be a very interesting and a bumpy few years as people make those decisions. But I'm like you in terms of the outcome. I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I feel also, because I mean, your American counterpart, I suppose, Alex Jones. But when I listen to Alex Jones, he does make me feel more despair, and you make me feel more hope. I kind of feel you're more focused on the sort of inner potential and the future evolution of where we could become, I find.
Well, I mean, I did an interview with Alex the other day on his show, and we talked for 2 hours about the nature of reality, which was a really a good thing that is now starting to be seen as fundamental to what is happening. And I've been on this journey where the top of my head blew off in 1990, and I couldn't tell you what planet I was on for a few months. And then I started, through amazing kind of synchronicity, uncovering this conspiracy of what you might call a 5 sense level of banking scams, engineered wars, and centralization of power, and all this stuff. And then the synchronicity of my life started taking me into other levels of this beyond that. And it's a simple fact that it is impossible for us to understand the world we live in what is happening, why things are done as they are, without understanding what reality is. And you see, most people, because that's what they're told from cradle to grave, even though the evidence is fundamentally in the other direction, believe that we're living now and standing here in a solid reality that is made up of solid things and solid atoms and all the rest of it. And it's not. The only place that this exists in the form that we're perceiving it is in our heads when it's decoded. And it's a holographic illusion. And that's why atoms have been found to have no solidity. They're just packets of energy, and if you go deep enough within them, then actually it's just space. There's nothing there. So if you are the few behind the Bushes and the Obamas and the Browns and the Camerons, and behind the people who appear to be in power, at the upper echelons of the secret society network, if you know what reality is and how we're decoding it, and how, if you can intervene in that decoding mechanism, you can get people to experience and perceive the reality that suits your agenda, then that puts you in a tremendous position of power over the population. And this is the reason why using Christianity as the excuse, that the shamanistic streams and the ancient cultures and the native streams of knowledge passed on through the generations, that's why they were targeted by the European colonial powers, and to a vast extent, in comparison to what was before, they took this knowledge out of circulation and imposed a false history and a false religious structure under many different names, but the same structure. And the idea was to edit out of public awareness the nature of reality itself. And so you've got scientists who are supposedly trying to discover answers to the big questions and the big mysteries of life, who are completely concreted into a sense of reality, and therefore the way they decode reality, that is constantly feeding them the perception that this world is what it appears to be. And it's like if you are trying to get a computer to read a disk in a certain way, and it's programmed to do that, then it's going to read the disk in a certain way. It's not going to go around the disk and ask questions and say, well, but what about this, and hold on a second. So it's just going to read the disk. And what the system does, and the education system is massively involved in this, is program people to read reality in a certain way. And this is why the hardest people to talk to about this information are elite students at places like Oxford University, because they've been through the system to such an extent.
That's it. They're very left brain orientated.
Totally left brain. It just they're imprisoned by it. And of course, the left brain sees everything in terms of sequence, in terms of time, and all the rest of it. And so they get locked into this reality, and they look at you. These elite students who, they're going to go off to be the leaders of medicine and science and politics and all this stuff, and they look at you, in bewilderment when you're talking about the fact that this world is not what it appears to be.
Well, I've got to tell you about an experience I had. I think you're probably one of the best people I can think of to talk to this about. I had a visionary experience when I was 7 years old. It was a negative, infernal one, and I listened to War of the Worlds. It was late 70s. The effect it had on my mind was that it made smells, tastes change. It made me perceive everything as demonic and sinister. Food changed flavour, smells smelt differently. I had claustrophobia, agoraphobia, every type of phobia I could imagine. And it was basically like a bad trip, a tryptamine fear that would last in my system for weeks. And that was kind of like one of my awakenings. I think that might have been, I think I might have had something that happened in my childhood that might have been similar to something that you had. And it took me many, many years to work out what to do with this, but I followed it through, and I'd actually used psychedelic shamanism as a way of understanding it, and now it's not a fear anymore. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you've just described is something that's happening all the time to people in their everyday lives. Not to that extent, but You see, the brain is decoding electrical signals passed to it by the five senses.
Yeah.
It then decodes those senses, or those electrical signals, into the senses of sight and touch and taste and all the things you've just described. And if something intervenes in that decoding system, then you can be eating something but tasting something else.
Oh yeah.
You know that you see this with hypnotist stage shows where they implant a belief into the person's mind, into their brain computer system, and they might be eating a potato, but what they're tasting is an apple.
Yeah.
And you try telling them they're not you're eating an apple. They'll just laugh at you, but they're eating a potato, and everyone can see.
I've seen it done with an onion once on some TV program.
That's right, but you see, all the hypnotist is doing is programming the brain to read reality in a certain way.
Yeah.
And that is what's happening to the human population 24/7 through education, indoctrination, in other words, through the media and all these things.
Yeah.
And if something on a deeper level starts to change the way that your brain reads reality, then all your senses go upside down, as you've just been talking about.
So I think it was the best thing that happened to me, because otherwise it was the first deconditioning thing that happened to me as a kid, and I'm glad that happened when I was a kid as well, because you're more in a state of flux to be able to change, aren't you, when you're so young.
Well, you know, it's like we are awareness.
Yeah.
We're not form, we're awareness.
Yeah.
Now our perception of reality comes from where that awareness is observing reality from. So we have this thing about paradoxes are mysteries. Well, paradoxes are not mysteries. Paradoxes are simply looking at the same thing from different angles, point of observation. So if you want to manipulate people's sense of reality so they behave and see the world the way that suits your agenda for control, then what you need to do is to program their point of observation, of their awareness. And so when you look at the education system and the media and all this stuff, they're constantly telling people what is possible and impossible, good and bad, moral and immoral. They're constantly telling people where to observe reality from. And if you do that, then you perceive the reality that they want to program us to see. So we are actually consciousness, not the form. We're infinite consciousness, and that point of awareness within that infinite consciousness can go anywhere we choose, and that is all possibility. What we are programmed to believe in is not all possibility, but limitation. I can't, you can't. Look at science. It's laws. This can't happen, that can't happen, this is impossible. Well, it's not, but it seems to be from your point of observation, which is through the left brain, which means all you can see is limitation and the need for structure and all the rest of it.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, I think you're...
People think about London as the great metropolis that we all know, but within it is something called the City of London. It goes back many, many hundreds of years, and it's the epicenter of the global financial system, if the truth be told. It's more than that, however. It is the center of a global web of secret societies that control the planet today. And they come from a series of interbreeding bloodlines which you can trace back to the ancient Middle and Near East thousands and thousands of years ago. And the staggering truth is that these interbreeding bloodlines under different names have increasingly controlled planet Earth from that time to this, never more so than today. In the next few hours on this video, you're going to be introduced, if you've not already read the book, my book, The Biggest Secret, to some staggering, stunning, and I'm the first to say, bizarre information. The basis of the video is an interview with a lady called Arizona Wilder, who was brought up and mind-controlled from almost the time that she was born to eventually, as she did, conduct satanic rituals at the highest level of the satanic ritual network, involving some of the most famous people on the planet. But we'll get into that as we go along. It is bizarre, and that's not even the most bizarre aspect of this story, which I'll come to as we progress. But the bizarre just happens to be true. And this video is designed to be a companion
to my book, The Biggest Secret, and you'd get more out of the interview with Arizona if you've read that book. But what I'm going to do to start with is just set up a few basic background details that can allow you, if you've not read the book, to follow the story and the revelations that Arizona is going to unfold for us. As I say, this is not just a City of London financial district. It is the center of a global web. It is the spider in the center of the web, as I expose in great detail in The Biggest Secret and a previous book, And the Truth Will Set You Free. And what the basis of that shows is that all these apparently different companies, banks, insurance companies, political parties, actually at the top of their pyramids interlock and are controlled by the same few people. About 13 families run the world, and offshoots of these bloodlines under different names. Just give you an example and a little guided tour of where we actually are, because that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Behind me is the Bank of England. This was created in a charter signed by William of Orange, who became William III, the King of England, in 1688, 1689, and he was one of these bloodlines. And from the moment that he took the throne, then the whole thing started to really epicenter in London. This is when the spider at the center of the web really moved in here. So we've got the Bank of England behind me, which was created thanks to William of Orange and the people that controlled him, because these guys are just puppets, of course. Over there we've got the NatWest building. It's one of the big clearing banks in England. If you just come around this statue, which I'll come to in a second, behind me there is the Mansion House. That's the centre of government in the City of London, this city within a city. And at the top you'll see the red cross on the white background, the flag. It's the flag of England, and that symbol goes back right into the ancient world. It was the ancient sun symbol of the Phoenicians back in the ancient Middle and Near East, and the Phoenicians had a number of deities. One of them was called Barati, the female. One was called Barat, the male. Barati and Barat became Britannia and Britain because the British culture was brought here by the Phoenicians about 3000 BC and after. And also they had deities, the Phoenicians, called St. George of Cappadocia, who killed the dragon. That became St. George of England, and that's, of course, the flag of St. George, the red cross on the white background today. Also, the Christian deity called St. Michael was an ancient Phoenician deity long before Christianity. So the Mansion House, the centre of government, is a very, very powerful place. We go around here, we've got the Royal and Son Alliance Insurance Company. The banks and the insurance companies interlock, and as a result of the fantastic amount of wealth that they can move around the financial markets every day, these interlocking organizations control the world financial system. If a stock market goes down and crashes, it's because it's meant to crash. And not everyone loses, you know, when that happens. If you know it's going to crash, you sell your stock, it crashes, you buy it back at a lower price, you then push it back up again and buy other stock at the same time at a few cents on the dollar or whatever. And that means that a financial crash can actually lead, if you know it's coming because you're creating it, to an amazing expansion of your holdings and your wealth. Over there we've got the Lloyds Bank building. That's another one of the big clearing banks which all interlock and are controlled by the same people. And then there we have the Royal Guardian Exchange building, another major insurance company which, like I say, interlock with all the others. And then we come back to the Bank of England. Now, this financial centre, along with places like Wall Street, where the bloodline families interlock again, the same people run America as run Britain, as run Germany, etc. They have funded many, many times both sides in wars. And ironically and sickeningly, Behind me, opposite the Bank of England, in the centre of this square, is a memorial to those who died in the 2 world wars. Let's just go and have a look at that. What happens in terms of creating wars is a technique, a mind manipulation technique that I called in my books problem, reaction, solution. And it works like this. If you want to introduce something, say centralization of power through the United Nations, centralization of power militarily with NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the biggest military organization in the world that's expanding all the time. If you want to centralize power into fewer and fewer hands, if you did that openly and said this is what we want to do, there'd be a reaction against that. People would say, hey, this is a fascist state you want to create. We're not having this. But through this technique of problem, reaction, solution, you can actually manipulate people to demand you do what you want to do anyway. So it works like this. First of all, you create the problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. You then report that problem through the media in the way you want it reported, because the media is owned by the same people that own the banks and etc. You get the public to react to your problem by saying something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And at that point, they, who have covertly created the problem and blame someone else, who've gleaned that reaction of do something, then offer the solution to the problems they have created. So if you take the world wars, after the First World War, in which the financial centers of London and Wall Street, etc., funded all sides, power on this planet was in fewer hands than ever before. After the Second World War, it was even fewer hands on the wheels of power. And as a result of the Second World War, we had the creation of the United Nations, we had the creation of NATO, and we had this great centralization of global power. Problem, reaction, solution. This is a wonderful example. Here you've got this memorial in the center of this edifice of global power, and it says, to the immortal honor of the officers, non-commissioned officers and men of London who served their king and empire in the Great War, 1914 to 1919, this memorial is dedicated in proud and grateful recognition by the City and County of London. I'm sure it is, because as a result of the sacrifice they made, power in the world came into fewer and fewer hands, not least into this area I'm talking in now, and also made a fortune, because not only does it create problem, reaction, solution, when you lend money to both sides, they then have to pay you back that money plus interest. When both sides have devastated each other's countries, they borrow more money from you so that they can rebuild their shattered countries. Therefore, power equals control of money in the world as it is today, and the control of money comes through debt, and wars create massive amounts of debt, therefore massive amounts of control. It says here, their name liveth forevermore. Total bullshit. People who are manipulated to fight wars are merely pawns in a game they don't understand. At the bottom here, it talks about the memory of those who died in the Second World War, 1939 and 1945. How ironic and how sick that that war was manipulated and funded to a large extent from this building here, the Bank of England. The governor of the Bank of England at that time was a guy called Montague Norman, a very, very close friend of Hitler's banker, and it was the Bank of England, Wall Street, and the transnational corporations which had German subsidiaries, not least the Rockefeller Standard Oil in America. Rockefeller's another one of these bloodline families, along with the Rothschilds and others. It was those companies and banks that funded Hitler and allowed him to build a war machine that cost literally millions of lives. And before we move on and expand this story, on the other side of this square is another very appropriate statue. It's of the Duke of Wellington. The Duke of Wellington fought the Battle of Waterloo against Napoleon. And this is a wonderful example again of the way the financial markets are manipulated to this day. What happened was that the House of Rothschild was funding Wellington, and also funding Napoleon. And what they did was they arranged, because communications weren't anything like they are today, of course, back then. What they did, they made sure that they knew the outcome of the war, or the Battle of Waterloo, before anyone else in this area of London did. So they found that Wellington, the Duke here, another bloody puppet, they haven't got the strings on the statue, unfortunately, so it's not accurate. They realized that Wellington had won the Battle of Waterloo. What they did, however, was put the rumor out in this area that Napoleon had won the Battle of Waterloo. As a result, there was a panic, stocks fell, there was a crash. What were the Rothschilds doing quietly, secretly? They were buying up all the stock they could at those crashed prices. And then along came the real story. Wellington had won the Battle of Waterloo. As a result, the panic was over, all those stocks rose in price, and the Rothschilds were not only fantastically richer, they owned vast amounts more of the economy of this country and in a much wider area of Europe. So the manipulation of the financial markets, that's just an example from the last century, is very much going on to this day. And it's manipulating your life, what your money will buy, and indeed if you have any money at all. And I'll just finish at this location by focusing yet again on the Mansion House. Arizona Wilder, the subject of this video, conducted satanic ritual at the highest level, and we'll come to that in detail. You'll see that in the interview. But it's very much part of these bloodlines that have increasingly controlled the planet over the last few thousand years. When you follow them through from the ancient Near and Middle East up into Europe, where they became the European aristocracy and the royal families of Europe, or royal family if the truth be told, because they're just the same bloodlines under different names, over to America and into the modern world, one thing follows again and again: human sacrifice, satanic ritual, blood drinking, and all this stuff. And I've talked to a number of people who have seen these rituals in the City of London, who have been subjected to some of them. And the Mansion House, the centre of government in the City of London, is one of the key places where it goes on around here when work here is finished for the day. And satanic ritual is very much part of the next topic I want to raise and talk about at another location, and that's mind control. A few can only control billions and the direction of their lives if they manipulate the way we think and manipulate the way we feel. Only by doing that can they control us, because there's not enough to do it physically. And so mind control is the foundation of how it's done, and we'll talk about that at the center of global mind control, at the center of the network that generates it, and that's the Tavistock Institute, not far from here, yet again in London. Well, we're now just a short drive from the City of London, next to this very appropriate poster, Very Bad Things, and I'm on my way to the Tavistock Institute. It is the center of global mind control and the network that does the research and creates the data and advances the techniques to mind control people in many ways. When you think about mind control, you might think of the Manchurian Candidate and some robot with a gun. Kill, 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 kill. But mind control is much bigger than that. If you take the definition of mind control to be manipulating the way people think and therefore behave, then the question is not how many people are mind controlled in the world, it's how few are not. Because every time you read a news story which is slanted to get you to see the world, a person or an event in a certain way, and you accept that slant and take it as truth, you're being mind controlled. Every time you see an advertisement and it persuades you to buy something you don't really need, you're being mind controlled. So all these different techniques are used all the time to get us to think and behave the way this few, this clique, this elite want us to. problem, reaction, solution, getting us to react to events and demanding solutions, the solutions the elite want us to demand. That's also mind control. So mind control is a vast, vast subject. And you know, in the streets of the cities of the world, or the towns of the world, you get these people with the clipboards that are asking you questions called opinion polls. Well, we're led to believe that these opinion polls are to get a feel for what people want so that we can give the people what they want. No, no. Overwhelmingly, those opinion polls are designed to find out if the programming, the manipulation of the public opinion, of the collective consciousness, is actually working. So they'll ask your opinion on various subjects, and if 80% say, yeah, we think in this certain way about this subject, okay, the programs work, brilliant. If only 40% think that way, then the question is, the manipulators ask, what more do we have to do to get more people to think the way we want them to think? So it's all about mind control and emotional manipulation. That's how it works. And we've just reached a point here, a military establishment. The Honourable Artillery Company headquarters, SAP. What is the military? What is the training for the military except fundamental mind control? What happens when you go through the training, especially in the elite organizations like the SAS and the Parachute Regiment in this country, or the Delta Forces in the United States? It is to get human beings to give their thinking processes away to those in the peak caps that have more stars or more stripes on their arm. And you want people in the military to so give their mind away that when someone in a peak cap says, shoot this group of people, then without saying, well, why, or what have they done to me, or whatever, it's all over. Yes, sir, yes, sir. The yes, sir mentality, mind control. And if those people had a drink with the opposition, the opponents, the enemy, they'd probably get on fine. But they don't get to that stage, because when the peak cap says shoot, they shoot. They are mind controlled. And this is what the military is about. So you have mass mind control, you have individual mind control, and I'm just going to now walk just around the corner from here and take you to the headquarters of global mind manipulation. Mind control has been known about for a very, very long time. And to understand many of the things that Arizona will be talking about in the interview, you just need to explain one of the fundamental techniques of mind control. It's called trauma-based mind control. There is a mechanism in the mind that shuts out the memory of trauma. You know, when you have a car accident and you can't remember what happened before, the trauma of the actual accident, and immediately afterwards? That's because the mind puts an amnesic barrier around trauma. Now that's very, very good, because obviously we don't want to keep reliving and re-remembering severe trauma like accidents and horrors of that kind. But this they began to understand massively in the concentration camps of Germany under the guy known as Joseph Mengele, the angel of death, the infamous mind manipulator and geneticist. They began to understand that if you could systematically traumatize someone, particularly before the age of 5 and 6, then you could turn their mind into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, amnesic barriers, which were unaware of the existence of the others. And if through hypnotic keys, triggers, words, signs, whatever, you could pull one of these amnesic barriers to the front to become the conscious level, that could experience something or be programmed to do something robotically, and then that compartment could be pushed back in the mind and another one pulled forward. Now this new one has no idea the other compartment exists, let alone what it's experienced or what it's been programmed to do. This has become known as multiple personality disorder, or DID, dissociative identity disorder, which is much more appropriate. And for short, these people are known as multiples. And this is some of the terms that Arizona will be using in the interview. Now, we've reached a point here, if we just turn around, of the headquarters of the Global Mind Control Network. This is the Tavistock Institute in Tabernacle Street, 30 Tabernacle Street in London. It was this network, and is this network, that coordinates the mind control program around the world, both on a mass and individual level. The background to this organization is this. It used to be part of the British military psychological warfare department, appropriately, and it was developed by a guy called Dr. John Rawlings Rees. And other parts of the network were established around the world. Stanford in America is one of them. And together they coordinate the mass mind manipulation of the human race and mind program people on an individual level. Just to give you an idea, these mind control people are overwhelmingly those that do the assassinations. Why is it always a lone nutter that's responsible for assassinations? So people say, oh, he was just a nutter. No conspiracy, no more investigation necessary. Why is it that the same psychological profile keeps turning up all over the world with guns, going crazy with guns in the street, killing people, creating problem, reaction, solution situations in which legislation comes through and is introduced as a result of those horrors? Interestingly, Martin Bryant, the man who went crazy with a gun in Port Arthur, Tasmania, just happened to be treated by a guy called Dr. Eric Cunningham Dax. Now, Cunningham Dax was the Tavistock Institute representative in Australia and a close associate for decades of Dr. John Rawlings Rees that sent the whole thing going. So when someone goes crazy with a gun or these horrific things happen, we need to ask the question, are they doing it from their own mind, or are they programmed to do it because of the effect of what they do? Now, Arizona Wilder was brought up from birth in these mind control programs, and her programmer was Joseph Mengele, the angel of death. And when he eventually died in the late 80s, because the subject of the programming becomes so attached to the programmer, almost worshipping the programmer, when the programmer dies, often the programming starts to break down. It did with this lady, and that's why now she's speaking out and talking in staggering detail about what she experienced and the people that she was involved with. People might find it hard to believe that Joseph Mengele was in the United States and South America after the war, but there was a British intelligence, American intelligence operation called Project Paperclip, which got people like Mengele and other leading Nazis out of Germany at the end of the war to continue their mind programming and to continue their genetic research and manipulation in America after the war, in the United Kingdom also. So this is some important background to this Arizona Wilder interview, but it's not even the biggest secret. The biggest secret is even more bizarre than that. Well, I've now come literally a few strides outside of the official boundaries of the City of London into an area known as Temple Bar, where the Royal Courts of Justice are established, and this is the centre of the British legal profession. Not just the British legal profession, but the legal profession of the world, as the biggest secret exposes. This is where they come to the bar, as it's said, to become barristers, the top of the legal profession, and eventually to become the judges that are part of the network, and the secret society network overwhelmingly, who are told what to do. And when you've got judges being told what to do by the secret society network, what justice is there? Temple Bar is named after the Knights Templar, one of the secret societies in the ancient world that I talk about in my books, and they were part of this network, and their successors are continuing that manipulation and agenda to this day. Now, I'm standing across the road from the Royal Courts of Justice here, outside something called the Outer Temple. This is one of the major secret societies that manipulate and control the legal profession and the workings of so-called justice in Britain, and indeed, like I say, further afield. But the reason I've come here overwhelmingly is to point out something in the centre of the road here, at the boundary between Temple Bar and the City of London. and it's a massive reptile figure, dragon figure, in the center of the road. Now, we're getting into what the biggest secret is here, because when you go around London, and indeed looking at the coats of arms of the aristocratic families, etc., again and again you keep seeing reptiles, you keep seeing dragons, and you've got the serpent race and the dragon race constantly recurring in the ancient texts describing the gods of the ancient world. And there is a reason for this. There is a reason why dragons appear everywhere, and that is the biggest secret, which Arizona Wilder also has experienced. Right at the start of our little tour of London, in that square outside the Bank of England, it's also possible to see again this same theme that keeps reoccurring of flying dragons, of flying serpents. We've seen one major serpent figure, serpent statue, at one entrance to the City of London near the Law Courts, and here I am now alongside the River Thames at another entrance to the City of London, this epicenter of global control. And what do we have to signpost the fact that you're entering the City of London? Yet another flying dragon, this one holding the shield with the red cross on the white background, this ancient symbol that I talked about with the flag on top of the Mansion House and the flag of England, the flag of St. George. So what's going on? Why, when you look at the ancient accounts of the ancient gods, do you again and again see this reoccurring theme of the serpent race, the serpent gods, the flying serpents? Why, in my research for the biggest secret, have I come across a stream of people from different walks of life all over the world who have told me the same thing, that they have seen, to their astonishment and amazement, they've seen key people in positions of power just demanifest from being a human physical form and become before their eyes a reptilian figure. When you look at the ancient gods of the Indus Valley, they talk about the Nagas, the gods who, wait for it, had the ability to manifest as human or manifest as reptiles. This is absolutely vital to understanding parts of the Arizona interview, because she has experienced exactly this. And the background to what's happening is quite simple. This three-dimensional world that we appear to live in is only one frequency, one dimension of existence. We have a frequency range which we can perceive. We call them the physical senses. But outside of that range are other frequencies, other dimensions of existence and life that are sharing the same space that we are. In the space that my body is occupying now, for instance, are all the radio and television frequencies broadcasting to London. I can't see them, they can't see each other, they're not aware of each other because they're on different frequencies. Only when the frequencies become very close do we have what we call interference on the television or interference on the radio. And it's the same with creation. We live in conscious terms in this three-dimensional world. So this is our reality, this is what we perceive. But there are other dimensions. And the one closest to this is the fourth dimension. And staggering as it may seem, and you really have to read The Biggest Secret to see the immense supporting evidence for this, a reptilian race from this fourth dimension is the source, or one of the key sources, of the manipulation of this world. Back in the ancient world, again documented endlessly in so many parts of the world, in ancient texts and legends and accounts, are the stories of how this extraterrestrial race interbred with humanity, creating hybrid bloodlines. And when you do the genealogical research, you find that it is these human-reptile hybrid bloodlines that actually have occupied the major positions of power through the history of the last few thousand years, and today are in the key positions of power, running the banking system, the business system, the politics, the military, etc. And Arizona Wilder, who had no idea of all this other information coming towards me in researching The Biggest Secret, when I met her, she said and told me about how at various satanic rituals involving the most famous people in the world, she had seen them again and again turn into reptile figures and then come back again during the ritual. I got a call from the head of an organization in America called Parents Against Ritual Abuse, who told me again from her experience how many of her clients who had been subjected to satanic ritual had reported the same story of how the participants had shape-shifted, as the term goes, from human to reptiles and back again during the ritual. And one of the key areas, one of the key families identified by Arizona Wilder in her accounts is one not too far from here, and it's very famous indeed. And that family and that bloodline live here, or at least partly live here. Buckingham Palace, one of the many palaces and homes of the British royal family, the House of Windsor. They're seen as bastions of the establishment, the British establishment, but in fact the Windsor bloodline is not British at all, it's German. It's really the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. And on Prince Philip's side, the husband of the Queen of England, he's a Mountbatten, which is really Battenberg. Again, another German line. In 1917, they changed the name from Battenberg to Mountbatten, from the House of Saxe-Coburg to Windsor, because at that time, you may recall, the German nation and the British nation were knocking hell out of each other in the trenches of northern France. And it was good PR from the British royal family's point of view to just change their name to sound more English. And this is just the farce and the facade behind so much, or behind which so much goes on. However, most people, if not almost everyone on the planet, would find the fact that the House of Windsor are one of these reptilian-human hybrid lines that shape-shift between human and reptilian form to be utterly, devastatingly ludicrous and unbelievable. I understand that. But the truth, the real truth, often is. And Arizona Wilder, in the interview that's coming up now, is going to talk about her experiences of seeing this happen. Well, I think that's all you need to know and appreciate to understand the kind of information that Arizona Wilder is going to reveal to us now, except one thing. Across the millennium years is crunch time in this whole agenda, crunch time for the human race. This is the time when this network of interbreeding bloodlines wants to bring in its global fascist structure of a world government to which nation states would be administrative units, of a world central bank and a world currency, a currency that wouldn't be cash, it would be merely electronic, for which there are fundamental implications for human freedom. And also the world army, which is designed to be NATO, expanding and expanding as it is now, of course, to become the fully fledged world army, world police force. And underpinning that little lot is designed to be a microchip population, in which we are microchipped with our financial details, our medical details, etc., etc. And that would allow not only electronic tagging, people knowing where we are all the time, it would allow the external manipulation through this electronic means of our mental and emotional processes. From this wider perspective, so much of what we do to each other must have the rest of creation shaking their heads in disbelief. The fact is that someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. Someone born in London is not more special than someone born in Liverpool. Someone who is white is not more special than someone who is black. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience. If you go down to the seashore and you pick up a droplet of water in your hand, how can anyone say that that droplet is any more or less special than all the other billions and trillions of droplets you see in the ocean before you? So when I began to understand all this and appreciate this other explanation to dogmatic religion and this world is all there is science, I started to ask a few questions of this situation. Like, how come that this explanation, at the very bottom line least, is as credible as the other two. How come the other two get guaranteed airtime, often no questions asked, here's your airtime, say what you like, and the alternative to both of them is ridiculed or condemned or suppressed by reflex action? The answer that I came up with was that clearly some people don't want the public to have access to this information. But who and what and why? And I began to ask other questions. Like, I don't know about you, but I've met a lot of people in my life, and I can't, to my knowledge, recall anyone who wanted a war, who had any interest in wars, who felt that wars were anything but horrific and to be avoided. So I thought, how come the world's been awash with wars throughout this century? Who's behind them? Or what? Or why? Then I kind of looked at this economic system that controls the world. An economic system that is so sane that the more successful it is in its own terms, the quicker it destroys the planet. It's the perfect environmental and human assassin. It insists every year that we take more from the earth even quicker, turn it into even more things, sell even more things, consume even more things, throw away even more things, to worship the real God of the modern world, economic growth. It insists that every year 20% of the people of the world consume 80% of the resources, while leaving the other 80% to get by on the other 20%. Crazy. Of course it is. But that's the economic system, take, make and throw away, that controls your life and mine. And that of 6 billion people nearly. So I thought, what's behind this self-destruction? Or who and why? I started to look at some of the other conventional wisdom that we pass on from generation to generation as the only way of doing things in this world. The wisdom that says, even though the economic system that I've just described is dismantling this planet, you ask a politician of any party anywhere in the world, what do we do to get out of this environmental situation? And they will say we must have more growth to raise the money to spend on the environment. If I said to you the way to put out a fire is to pour more petrol on it, you'd say he's out of his mind. But that's what the politicians are saying when they say about more growth to sort out the environment. It's conventional wisdom that it's fine to treat animals as mere commodities, to be made as fat as possible, as quick as possible, on as little food as possible. To condemn every year billions of animals to a lifetime of pain, fear and suffering in the name of economics. You're sane if you judge your success in healthcare not by how many people are healthy, but by how many diseased people you manage to treat. We're treating more patients than ever before. Why? Why are so many people ill? It's conventional wisdom that rising house prices are a sign of economic success when thousands are homeless because they can't afford them. You're sane, finally, if you think it's fine to support a system that is so successful that every year it turns out more suicide, alcoholism, drug taking, homelessness, pain, stress, fear and suffering in all its forms. We'd be in real trouble if this system wasn't working, wouldn't we? That is sanity, apparently. But it's the ultimate insanity. So who's behind it? Or what and why? I began to realize, too, that against the background of this utter self-destruction, on this same planet is stunning wisdom. And I began to see also that there is a great difference between cleverness and wisdom. They're not the same thing. This system is very clever, but it isn't very wise, and it's the lack of wisdom that is the problem. And I began to see that what we call wisdom is often not found in this state-of-the-art letters after their name system. It's actually found in the native peoples that this system would see as backward. Piece of Native American wisdom, what have become known as American Indians. When you have cut down the last tree and poisoned the last river, you will know that you cannot eat money. That's wisdom. And there's another piece of very famous American Indian wisdom. In 1854, the American government made an offer for Indian land. And